The following clip is from a previously recorded episode of the Cherish Each Moment podcast. So some cities out here in Utah are really starting to do something about the drought that we're finding ourselves in this year and making some changes in the way that they handle their watering schedules. And probably a week or so ago, Ryan Quick from the Highlander Lawn YouTube channel, if you haven't seen that, if you haven't seen his channel, go ahead and check that out. Highlander Lawn. I'll leave a link down in all the show notes and the descriptions and all the places that you get extra information about the stuff I talk about here. It's different on every platform. But yeah, Ryan reached out to me and told me what they were doing up in the city he lives in. He's about an hour, probably a little over an hour north of me. And every city, as I've mentioned here, is kind of different in how they handle their water. And he reached out to me, told me what they're doing up there, and I thought it was really interesting, and asked if he would come on and talk about what's going on up there. So Ryan is here on the phone. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Thanks, Jimmy. Glad to be here.
So tell us what is going on in your city as far as irrigation water.
Well, normally, if we have a normal season, usually what happens is that the secondary is due to turn on April 15th and run through the season, and then shut off on October 15th. Prior to you and I talking, there had been no changes in that. The schedule was still going to stay the same. And the night of the 14th at about 8 o'clock, one of the city councilmen came on to one of the Facebook pages for the citizens page, and just to let the citizens know that the water would not be turned on. And, I felt that it was kind of a snap decision, and it wasn't really didn't have the citizens brought in to weigh in on it. Because there's some cities that are around us that have had their water on for a little bit of 2 weeks prior to that they've been on. And so, being the lawn enthusiasts that we all are, I was looking forward to being able to put some irrigation water down and get some fertilizer down and be able to get it soaked in to get moving on the year. And so that was a little bit frustrating. I understand. I mean, I'm all about water conservation. I think that it's, especially in Utah, where we're the second driest state in the union, and we have to be very careful about the resources that we do have. And I'm all about that. In fact, the way that I water and the type of irrigation system that I have is all geared to make sure that I get the absolute most efficient that I can when I do water, and make good use of those resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the one thing that would kind of mess me up, and probably you feel the same way, is that they didn't let you know until the day before they were scheduled to turn the water on. And that's probably the biggest issue there. But you mentioned that you have a setup, your setup around your yard and your sprinklers is geared towards conservation. Talk a little bit more about that.
Okay. Well, about my brother, just a quick little backstory. My brother runs a sprinkler system company up in my hometown of Pocatello, Idaho. And when I moved to Utah, we purchased a home that the system obviously had been installed by somebody that wasn't quite that well versed in it. And I could tell that when we did turn the system on that I was going to have some problems. And I was like, we're going to have to cut in heads and whatnot. And he said, don't worry, I'll be down. I want you to take a look at these. And he introduced me to the Hunter MP rotators, and I absolutely fell in love. Now, one of the things about the MPs is that they don't pump out the amount of water that like a pop-up fan would. Your normal, what you see every day walking past somebody's yard or past a park or whatever it might be. They go on a very slow flow rate, low volume, where a 360 pop-up fan head would pump out 1.5 gallons in an hour. Mine will pump out 0.4 gallons in an hour. And so that makes a huge difference to the length of time that you have to water, because it basically waters like a very light rain shower. But the benefit is it allows for more permeation down into the soil and doesn't oversaturate. And then you deal with the problems of runoff and waste that you would if say, for example, you were to just flood irrigate something, much like throwing too much water on a sponge. Once it reaches the point of saturation, then it's not doing you any good, and the water finds another route to go.
Right. So a lot of other sprinkler systems, especially the smart watering systems like the Rachio, they offer features like cycle soak to kind of make up for that, to kind of help with the saturation. So with your sprinkler system, are you using a smart system that offers that still, or can you bypass that altogether because of the heads that you're using, these MP rotators?
Well, I can bypass that a little bit with the heads that I'm using, but one of the biggest things is that I calibrate my system every year. You can use tuna cans, you can use the little with the spikes in it, but I calibrate it every year to make sure that I'm getting, when I water, at least each time that I water, at least a half inch down in all my areas, and then make sure that because you and I both know you need an inch a week in the spring and fall, and maybe an inch and a half in the summertime when the heat's on. And so each time I have a watering cycle happen, that's my goal, is to hit that half inch and be done.
Right.
Not to overdo it, and make sure that I get, again, that permeation and that deep watering that will then make the roots chase the water as it starts to percolate through the ground, and cause the roots to chase it, and in doing so grow deeper and have a healthier lawn.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that I've touched on before is, I'm sure that you've had neighbors probably approach you and wonder why you're watering your lawn so much, just because, this, like you said, those sprinklers take longer to put out that half inch of water because of the slower flow rate. So you have the advantage of that slow flow rate because of what you've already talked about, but you have the disadvantage of fooling your neighbors into thinking that you're watering a lot more than you really are.
Yes. I've had the poor experience of being on the wrong end of that.
Yeah. Didn't you tell me once that your water was actually shut off?
Yes. In fact, right after my brother had come down at that installation at my prior house, because, for some reason you get these neighbors that are quite observant, for lack of a better term. And because of that flow rate, I was watering for twice as long. I was still saving almost 30% of the water because I was getting a much better, deeper water. I wasn't pumping it out for 15 or 20 minutes. I was running it for 30 and 35, I think, in one area. But that being said, he was observant of it, thought that I was watering twice as long as I should have been, never inquired of me what the situation was, and called in the city, and without any sort of discussion, the city shut my water off. And it wasn't until I noticed, I'm like, man, I'm starting to see stress, because my watering happens in the late evening, if not early into the early morning, to be able to accommodate those longer run times. And he must have been up pretty late, but he noticed it. And I had noticed that things were starting to dry out, and I'm like, I wonder if they've shut the water off. So when I inquired about it, they asked me for my name and my address, and I told them, and they're like, well, yeah, we've shut your water off due to over usage of water. And my jaw hit the ground and I think broke the concrete, because I was like, that's just ridiculous. That's not the case. And so I had the spec sheets with me. I went to the city officials and showed it to him, and he was like, wow, you're right. You're actually saving almost a third of the water that you would normally just, it'd build up, saturate, and run right off. And I said, yes, that's exactly why we've got these. So I wouldn't be surprised in a place as arid and dry as the state of Utah that we don't see some more push towards higher efficiency heads. But one of the biggest things is that education of the residents in our areas, because that's the big thing. Is because I did have a video that I put out last year that talked a little bit about that, and the question had been posed. I just moved to the area, and this is a person that had just joined the group, and said that my yard's not looking too well. I just want to know, how long is everybody watering?
Yeah.
And literally responses of, I water every day, twice a day.
Wow.
And I was just floored. I'm like, that is an absolute waste of resources.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing was that person just happened to say, "Oh yeah, we had a fungus problem, but we got that fixed." And I was like, "You think?" I I would have a fungus problem too if I was watering every day.
Twice a day.
Twice a day. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's really the point to drive home is the education. I'm working on a video around proper watering practices too, and hopefully that will be well received and help people understand a little bit, because there's so many different variables when it comes to sprinklers and things like that, and different strategies around watering your lawn.
And there's other you can add as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like hydrotane. That's a big one I'll be pushing this year.
Yep. And so that's another thing I wanted to ask you. Was the only change your city made just delaying the day that they're going to turn the water on for you, or are they making any other moves too?
Well, like most city and any types of government do, they sometimes don't tell you the entire story unless you're paying attention. But they did make the comment that they're pushing it back to May 1st. What they failed to also include, unless you were paying attention, is that they also shortened the season by 2 full weeks. So we lost basically a whole month of watering.
So now, they're still going to shut you off on October 15th?
No, they're shutting me off October 1st.
Whoa.
And so not only will my grass go dormant faster, because it's going to start to dry out. And as you know, living here, that clay soil, if it doesn't have some water in it, it'll turn to concrete pretty fast.
Yeah.
And compaction becomes an issue and whatnot. But it's an ever changing battle, that trying to make sure that we're, we want to be good conservationists, just like you see a lot of people who are hunters and fishermen,
right? And
that nature. Those are some of the best conservationists that I've ever met. They have the respect of the land and the wildlife, and go the extra mile to make sure that those things are preserved, because they want to be able to continue that way of doing things. And I think that lawn enthusiasts, if they're really truly caring about their area, and I think that the drier and more arid the area that you live in, the more you're apt to be more proactive in making sure that you're being responsible in what you're doing.
I agree. So they're not going to limit you to certain days of when you can water or anything like that?
No.
At least not yet.
No, yeah, at least not yet. I guess I could go hog wild if anybody wants, but I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah.
I did make the comment to the city councilman that when they make such short snap decisions, I said, you realize that people are going to just end route this decision and just turn on their culinary and do it with a sprinkler.
Yeah.
And, the thing that amazed me was that didn't even seem to faze him. Because they feign conservation, but yet it was okay to be able to turn on your culinary and quote unquote, they'll have to pay the premium for that.
Yeah.
And
is your secondary line metered?
No. That's something that I wouldn't be surprised to see happen in the future, that we see that. Of course, that's going to be a massive expense, but
yes.
But currently it is not metered, and it's fairly, as it goes, really inexpensive on the whole. Secondary water comes with its challenges. I'm not sure if you've got secondary where you live, but it comes with all sorts of other challenges other than just shutting the water on and off.
Right.
Yeah,
it's a little different down here where I live. We are on secondary water, and they never shut it off.
Wow. Lucky.
Yeah, and the reason being is it's the same supply for the fire hydrants in the city.
Oh, wow.
It's the same infrastructure. So if they shut off the secondary supply for all the irrigation, then the fire hydrants won't work. So
wow, that's an interesting way of doing things, because if they ever do try to reverse that, they've got to overwork the entire system.
Yep. Which I don't think that will ever happen.
Wow.
That would be a massive undertaking. However, every house built after probably 2014, because ours was one of the last houses to avoid this. Every house built after 2014 is metered here.
Really?
So everybody that has a newer house is paying for the secondary water that they use. And the rest of us that are grandfathered in, so long as they don't put a meter in us, in our, on our supply, we're paying a flat rate. And it's like dirt cheap. So
yeah. But I think that, because those homes that are not metered, I think that sometimes it breeds apathy. What do I care? It's cheap.
right.
I'll just basically waste it away, and what does it bother? What do I care? I'm paying pennies on the dollar compared to these other chumps that are paying for the metered water, and I think, again, there's got to be a happy medium, and we need to really start caring about the resources that we have, or we're going to find ourselves in even worse trouble.
Right. I agree. And I think, like you said before, it all comes back to education. And as long as, we can put out the content and the material and help people understand, there are easier ways to do this, and there are conservative ways to do this. And you can do it without watering your grass every day and have an even better looking lawn.
Absolutely.
Cool. So any changes to your strategies based on the new information that you've received from your city?
Well, I did want to bring up last year what ended up happening, and I thought that was very good. I was paying attention to a little bit of what John Perry does on Lawncology, and he was talking about watering right during the time, right before the water was supposed to turn on. And this is before I launched my channel, and he had made the comment, I know that, a lot of places are getting, and I'm paraphrasing to the nth degree here, but the basic gist of it was, I know that a lot of folks are getting ready to turn their water on. And he urged, well, why don't you wait another few days or a week or whatever, and allow that, your roots to really chase. And I was like, wow, you know what? I'd probably do that. So in all reality, I'm going to be turning my water on maybe a week later than I did last year, because I really found a lot of value in that. Again, just because we have lawn channels and whatnot doesn't mean that we can't be educated, and or somebody can't teach us something.
Yeah.
And I was very attuned to that, and I happened to be inserting some more sprinkler heads into one of my mow strips, and when I cut it into through the sod and dug down, I couldn't believe it. I lost the footage on it, and some people may think this is a large fishtail, but that's fine. But I measured my roots, and they were almost 12 inches, and I actually filmed it and lost it, but my comment was, well, look at those roots, John Perry. But
classic.
We've seen that before, and I think they've even made it into a t-shirt these days.
Oh, I'm sure it's out there. So how's your lawn looking right now without having water yet? Is it waking up?
Got some stressed areas. There is one area that, because I live right across the street from the high school, and I get a lot of traffic on one of the mow strips by the crosswalk. And I had put down some Bewitched Kentucky bluegrass seed, which is rated for high traffic and drought stress and things of that nature, trying to, work against what's working against me. And as far as, the traffic that goes across it, but with the fact that it's starting to dry up, they're starting to create some paths in those. And I'm probably going to need to maybe hand water just that one little 80 square foot section to make sure that I've got some water going on it and help push the growth to help combat the traffic that's walking and treading over it. But other than that, my yard's not looking too bad. I've got some stressed areas that I'm kind of watching pretty closely. If I get to the point where I probably need to throw just a little bit on there, I might, but I really want to see if I can really stretch the limits and see if we can't make it, because I've said this many times on my channel, and I'm sure that you feel the same way, is that grass is exceedingly resilient.
Yes.
And no matter almost what we do to it, 90% of the time it will come back, and usually come back stronger than it was before.
Yes.
And so I truly believe that. I say that a lot to my neighbors, that I had one that dumped an entire bag of fertilizer on his yard, thinking that his spreader setting needed to be 15 when he was looking at the wrong line, and it needed to be like a 6 or a 7. and he literally put the entire bag out, and that bag should have lasted in probably 2 seasons just that, because it's a 4-step program, and
right.
he should half of one this season and half of the other next season. And he really fried that yard pretty good. And I told him, I said, yeah, we'll come back. It's going to take a little while, but I guarantee it will rebound and do well. But don't be sweating too many bullets. But maybe that add a little bit more water to the yard if he was sweating it out.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on and telling your story about what's going on up there, and we'll look forward to seeing how things progress on your channel this year, and wish you all the best with it.
Well, thanks, Jimmy. I really appreciate being on the podcast and for you inviting me.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming.
You bet.
That's Ryan Quick, the Highlander Lawn.